Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me all right? Okay, well, welcome to the Testimonials from EPI Alumni panel. My name is Kara Moyer-Duncan. I am Assistant Director of EPI and Associate Professor of Africana Studies in the Marlborough Institute here at Emerson. We want to get things started today by sharing a short video on EPI called John's Story. The video focuses on John Yang, who you'll have the pleasure of meeting very soon. John was the first EPI student to attend Emerson's Boston campus after being released from prison. So let's start off with John's story, and then we'll talk some more.
My hometown is just like any other city. There are positives and negatives. And unfortunately, I grew up where there was a lot of negative. The criminal activity outweighed education. It was just more about survival. Being a son of refugees, there were social and financial strains that seemed impossible to overcome. And growing up where I grew up, in the environment I was in, an education didn't fulfill the needs of being who you were and what you needed to do to survive. Just making it home from school was a struggle. It didn't matter whether you were getting good grades. My parents wanted me to graduate high school and pursue some sort of higher learning, but it was difficult. They had only been in the US a short time, and they never went to a university, so they didn't know how to help me. As I was trying to figure out my own path, so were they. Before the EPI program, prison for me was all about making my body tired, physically exhausting myself, so I wouldn't think about the time I didn't have, the time away from my family, my age, the time I was wasting. Once I was in the EPI program, it was no longer about flexing my physical abilities or my muscles. It was knowing that by picking up a book, I was creating a different way of being, finding new strengths and abilities that I didn't know I had. The EPI faculty never saw an incarcerated person. They only saw a student who was willing to learn and grow. When you're incarcerated, you have no access to electronic equipment, so we would spend hours writing essays by hand, 3 to 5 pages long, sometimes 3 to 4 drafts. The faculty supported us, and they were very attuned to our limitations. They knew it was about the process, not the deadline. Education was something that I didn't see as being valuable. But now having gone through 2-3 years of it, it feels like something I don't want to stop. Being able to come to Emerson College has allowed me to become aware of the opportunities that are available to me. Not only has this opportunity allowed me to want to give back to the community, but it also showed me how I can pursue these goals in the most effective way. The post-incarcerated population is full of people who need a lot of help. I believe education is what levels the playing field for us as we re-enter the outside world. I hope as I continue to further my education, I can make an impact on individuals like me coming home.
So I hit the panel moderator jackpot because I have the pleasure of being here with 4 Emerson Prison Initiative alumni, David Baxter, Ahmad Bright, Matt Hudson, and John Yang, all of whom I've had as students, some in multiple classes. If you talk to faculty who've had the opportunity to teach inside, you will often hear that teaching for EPI is amongst the most rewarding, if not the most rewarding teaching experience that we've had. The EPI classroom is a dynamic and vibrant learning space. Students come to class hungry to learn. having done all of the reading, having thought about it carefully, ready to debate and discuss the ideas at hand, and to really think seriously about how the content of the course relates to their lives and the worlds around them. The Emerson Prison Initiative believes that access to a high-quality liberal arts education is a human right, and we see the value of increasing access to a liberal arts education in our students who think critically, who write and communicate clearly, and feel a strong sense of commitment to bettering their communities. So the goal for this panel is to learn more about what having access to college and prison has meant for people who've been incarcerated. We will begin by having each of our panelists introduce themselves and share a little about their reflections on what having access to college in prison meant for them. Then I'll have a few specific questions for them as follow-ups, and then we will open it up to all of you for questions. So let's get started with John Yang, who you all know, right?
Thank you.
So, John, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what having access to college inside meant for you.
Sure. So, my speech professor is gonna kill me for this, but I'm gonna read, okay? Just because, since we're talking about cultural shift, we can shift the change on how, things are delivered as well. Hello, my name is John Yang. I am from Fitchburg, Massachusetts. For me, Emerson College in prison meant that a 16 to 18-year prison sentence would not be my undoing. At the time, my physical boundaries were limited to a tight space made of fences, barbed wires, and lines painted on cement that directed where I could walk. But the boundaries that my mind could heighten to became unlimited. Through academics, I learned about social power structures and what this meant for those who didn't understand what this meant. With each EPI course, from race and ethnicity to argument and advocacy, I became better at understanding the social conditions of the world I was living in. The more I learned, the more I was gifted with avenues in creating and achieving the change I wanted to break away from the lifestyle I had believed I was restricted to. I used to say crime and violence is all I know. That is no longer true, and no longer the only option for me to escape the inequalities of striving to live in a racial, hierarchical social structure in which the prominence is white dominance. Yes, I do speak English. But it wasn't until college and prison that I finally learned to understand the language of success.
Next up, we have Mac Hudson. So Mac, please introduce yourself and share what having access to college and prison meant for you.
Hi, my name is Mac Hudson, and what access to college really was for me was really about, well, I guess it helped me really understand the many ways that the system operated, and in order to fight something successfully, you gotta know how to fight it and all its various routes. And so unearthing what that meant was really what college exposed me to, through various literatures, different points of view, the discussions we would have in class that would come out to be some hellified debates, right? So much so that the TAs done forgot they were teaching us. But in honesty, I mean, it really helped me gain a greater expression of myself, right? So that when I spoke, people could really truly understand what I mean. And that goes a long way.
Thank you, Mac. Our next speaker is David Baxter. So David, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what having access to EPI inside meant to you.
All right. I'm going to take this mic off so y'all can hear me. I think it'll work better. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Baxter, and I am an EPI alumni. What college meant for me in prison, well, my trajectory with education was different than my colleagues in the sense that I was afforded the opportunity to go to college before my incarceration. I often think about the difference. I guess I didn't appreciate it and understand it the way that I did when EPI came in. Now, I can't speak for all college programs, but EPI and the way Manisha and Kara and the rest of them designed it gave me not only a great appreciation for education, but a greater understanding of the difference between schooling and education. And when you have a group of wonderful individuals like them who set out to not just get you an A, B, or C, or get you a degree, but to cultivate the being in the person, the outcome, I'm telling you, is magnificent.
That's right.
And I would like to think everyone up here is a representation of that. So in closing, for me, college and prison represented one thing, a chance. Not only a chance to recapture something that I felt I cheated myself out in the past, but as I started to understand education in the way that they was teaching us, it also started making me understand that I have a greater role in playing that would reimagine what public safety looks like and how that applies to prison systems and carceral systems, not only in Massachusetts, but throughout the nation. But overall and mainly, it was a chance to make something whole again that was voided in many ways. And that something I'm talking about is me. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And last, but certainly not least, we have Ahmad Bright. So Ahmad, please tell us a little about yourself and what having access to college at MCI Concord meant for you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, your mic's not on.
It's not on, right? No? Yeah. How about now? All right, we're in business. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today and witnessing us speak about our experiences with education and while incarcerated. So my name is Ahmad Bright, and my road to higher learning is somewhat unique as well. I first learned that I was going to be incarcerated while on a college tour in Atlanta at 17 years old. And it would be 10 or 12 years before I was actually able to enroll in college through EPI while incarcerated. So for me, EPI was almost like an opportunity to come full circle or to kind of restart life while incarcerated, like given the path that I was already kind of on. But more than that, EPI also gifted me a community of peers that I didn't have prior to EPI while incarcerated and in my other previous educational experiences. In EPI, I was around a bunch of people who came from similar socioeconomic backgrounds, also had similar racial makeups as I did. But my former education, I was always like one of two African Americans in a classroom setting. So being an EPI, again, it afforded me a community of peers, a community of brothers and supporters that we have through our teachers and TAs. And it's really just been an amazing experience, and it's one that I cherish and I deeply value. Thank you.
Yes,
Take your mic back.
Thank you, Ahmad. So we'll start with some follow-up questions, and John, will begin with you. So you were the first EPI student to come to the Boston campus. Can you tell us about what the transition has been like from college inside to college outside?
Sure. I just wanted to mention something about earlier as well too. In the video you saw that I had said we didn't have access to electronic devices. Then I heard earlier that they're giving out laptops now. So that's like mind blowing, right? Because we were like writing papers by hand, and these new cohorts are just typing away. So I mean, that's crazy because I've written 15-page papers for Manisha. Where is she?
Where is she?
So I mean, I don't know. But anyways, back to the question. The transition from college inside to college outside has been nothing short of rehumanizing. Let me get a second. In prison, if you had an issue with an assignment or a class subject, there was no support other than your cohort or our tutors. On the Emerson campus, there is this enormous sense of community here, and help is always available. When I first came home, understanding the finances that are involved with attending college was difficult for me. I mean, I'm Asian, yeah, I understand I'm supposed to be like, really good at math, but it's totally different, just playing on stereotypes. Not only was Emerson's financial staff knowledgeable in helping me get the most out of the resources available to me, but they also took the time to walk me through what unsubsidized and subsidized loans meant, a language that is still foreign to me, even after 3 semesters. For someone like myself, who had believed I could never afford to go to college, this meant a lot. Just to be able to have this information, it was greatly appreciated, and it aided me in preparing for the costs of daily living, such as commuting to and from campus and not having to worry whether or not I can make it to school. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And John brings both the heart and the comedy to the EPI family.
I'll take it.
All right, next we have Mac. So Mac, after completing the bulk of your degree inside, you joined us on the Boston campus this semester, and you will be graduating in May with your bachelor's degree. So currently, you're enrolled in a full-time load of classes while working full-time at Prisoners Legal Services. And for those who don't know you, you have a long history as an activist and an advocate for people who are incarcerated. How did college help prepare you for your role at PLS?
Oh, well, in all honesty, I think for me, I had been doing the advocacy thing for so long that by the time, and I think I kind of made this point a few times, that by the time I came to EPI, many people would probably question, like, all right, I mean, you're kind of self-taught, you're very articulate, you know things, you're overturning cases, you're organizing inside the prison. What else is there to, why would you engage in this? And for me, I always had a natural curiosity just about how college worked, like what was their modes of training, the discipline behind it. And I missed out on an earlier opportunity that, some older cats was telling me soon as I came in, like, yo, take advantage of the prison. Take advantage of this college that's going on. When I came in, college was everywhere. It wasn't like it is today where it's pockets of it now. And then they did away with the Pell Grants by the time I decided that I was going to take advantage of it. So it left me with this innate curiosity. When I did get into college, when I decided to take up EPI and compete, because I was just at that moment when they published it, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely need to get on top of this. I ain't missing it this time, right? So, I competed. I was surprised that I got in, and then when I got in, I was just like, I think for me, it was more like understanding how to articulate the greater systems that were around me, and then how to better access those systems. Like I was familiar with how to access the courts. I was familiar how to access some legislators, but I wasn't, fully aware of the many ways that you can access those entities, right? And I think that for me is really what EPI gave me the ability to do, is to analyze in a way that took me out of my legal mode, right, of learning, and really gave me the discipline to really now step outside myself and to really kind of look at things in a more or less holistic point of view, right? Even dealing with those various differences of opinion, how to navigate those conversations without feeling like, it's going to result into physical violence. And that's what you learn in the art of debate when we're in class. The emotions were very high at some times, but we all understood we was in an academic space, which allowed for that, And because of that, we felt safe with one another and we grew. And then now it got to the point where, and I've said this many times, that, we're like brothers sitting up here. Like, this is not something that we just went through, and when we all went our separate ways, we were rooting for John when he was out, when he was the first to go into the college campus. And we was hoping that, he brought with him our representation, in which he did. And we're so proud of him because of that.
Oh man, it was heavy, y'all.
Now today he says he's happy that all of us is out here to share the load. So, and I understand that, but it meant that we were connected in a way that we still remain connected to those struggles of brothers and sisters behind the wall, today. Just because we're here not as our own persons, but also as a representation of those cohorts that are still behind the wall learning, and asking you to understand why it's important to invest in education. So.
Thank you, Mac. Ahmad, you resumed your studies on the Boston campus this fall after completing a year and a half of college inside with EPI. So given the range of educational experiences that you've had, how has your understanding of the purpose of education evolved over time?
Well, my education was kind of unique too, in terms of EPI students. From K through 8th grade, I went to a Quaker school, Cambridge Friends School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And also for high school, I went to a prep school in Cambridge, Buckingham, Brown, and Nichols. So I kind of came in with a very traditional sort of educational background, but at the same time, I had like social issues that kind of pulled me away from really taking full advantage of the educational opportunities that were afforded to me. Having the opportunity to do EPI after years of kind of an autodidactic approach or like a self-study approach, I just have a more appreciation, of course, for education, but I also have more ownership of my own education. And that's something that I think I mainly got through my years of studying, being self-taught, teaching myself Spanish, teaching myself other languages. But when I was able to go into EPI, it just kind of reinforced the importance of being present in your own education, taking the initiative, asking questions, seeking out help when you don't understand something. Because to the extent that you take ownership of your education, you're going to, one, just become a more educated person, of course, but at the same time, you're going to develop more tools that will then propel you to success upon completing your education. That's my personal view. Thank you.
David, you were the first EPI student to be released with your bachelor's degree in hand. How did
Show off.
releasing from prison with a completed college degree impact your reentry experience, and how has EPI's reentry and college outside program supported you?
Wow, that was a lot in that question. Let's start with the first. Yeah, I heard statistics earlier about how hard it is for men and women to reintegrate back in society. For me, it wasn't, I often talk to my colleagues here, my cohort rather here, about it wasn't so much the degree itself rather than the process that helped me. Because I had to undergo some serious stuff. Because there was a time in my life when I adapted a subculture that would have not allowed me to sit here today. So it was through the process of self-knowledge first, and then coming into EPI to help me put that self-knowledge in perspective. Because I did a lot of self-thinking, self-educating, books, reading, but it was this battalion of scholars that Manisha gave us access to that really that gave you the aha moment. Oh, I get it. Because if anyone ever tried to read Foucault on his own, you know, that's a whole different language. He's writing in English, but it's really like hieroglyphics. So it was that process that allowed me to ultimately, of education and questioning, the ability to question is the greatest thing EPI, I say, did for me. And it was through that knowledge journey and that questioning that I was ultimately able to reject criminality and move into this greater self-awareness and a greater personal self. So coming home, there was something that education does to you. Now we could talk about it making you job ready. We all know that we can get a job ready, and those are wonderful things. But when you possess a set of skills that allow you to see in ways that others don't see. See, I felt my inner sociology in BPI. I didn't realize I really loved it until I became friends with another cohort member named, and he started to help me unpack, and I loved the way power operates covertly through systems, and I became in love with that. So in the work that I do in the community, my activism, my organizing, my youth work with Roka, it allows me to go into these systems and be a better version than I would be. So that, I believe, right now I lead in my work in numbers and promotion, and I know y'all don't understand ETO, so I believe EPI prepared me to be that way. To sit, analyze, question, see the situation, and act on it better than before EPI. So it has helped me, it's put me in situations that's wonderful. Having a bachelor's degree is wonderful, your resume, and I got a greater salary. So I appreciate that. Like I'm talking like greater than those at my employment who don't have it. So there's so many wonderful benefits to college behind bars. But I often speak to the cultivating of the being. I can't stress how important that is. And because I love academic, I am comfortable in that space. I like to write. My cohorts and I love to write. I love the challenge. I love to articulate and challenge readings, and so that's where I'm comfortable at. So that 5 years put me in an element where I can be my best self. So for me, yes, they helped me. And as far as EPI programming, they've been supportive from day one. Came home, gave me a Mac. I didn't even know how to use the Mac because I don't think they had Mac. For the record, I did 19 years. So you could think about this. This was 2003 I left. Some of my cohort did less, some of them did more, if you can imagine. So coming home, I had to re-engage with a society I've been gone for a long time. And thanks to wonderful friends and EPI staff, such as Betsy Chasey, somewhere in here, and others, who slow walked me through the process of slowly acclimating back to society. You know what I mean? certain fees we come home with. Sometimes after doing 20, 30 years, you don't have $1,000 to pay for a license. So they financially, in some aspects, they helped, and they just been there every step of the way. I mean, one phone call away, and willing to support you, whether it's with dealing with systems, parole. I've been offered. You need me to call your PO? Like, what's going on? Like, they're there, and I couldn't ask for a greater family than the EPI family that I have, that stretches from TAs to all the professors that took the time, even if they was hesitant to what going inside a prison for the first time would look like. They come in one way, they always leave another. Every last one of them. It's tears after every semester. And we have grown together, and I just look forward to whatever this journey takes us. I just thank you all for showing up. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So now what we'd like to do is to turn it over to questions from you. So we did have a microphone before. Do we have a floating microphone? Okay, great. So if you all could line up if you're interested in asking a question, and we just ask that you keep the microphone close to your mouth so that they can hear you on the live stream. Then if you can project your voice, if you can speak up so everyone can hear you, that would really be wonderful.
Don't everybody get up at once.
Yeah, I know.
I'll ask a quick question. I just want to know if you could keep it short, each one of you, if you have plans. Once some of you need to finish your bachelor's degree, some have already finished it. If you have plans to continue on to graduate school, master's or PhD programs, and what you see yourself pursuing after that.
Sure, I could go first. There has been some talks. I don't know. I have taken a minor in nonprofit communications. I want to continue to travel down that road, and maybe in some arena of post-incarceration work, social work. So yeah, maybe some more school. Until then, I don't know.
So for me, everybody's trying to fast track me to law school afterwards. And I said that I'll do it only if I can get a free ride. Otherwise, I'm all set. But pretty much, what I'd like to do is continue on the avocation that I've been doing behind the wall. So in making this trajectory, I agree with David that, EPI has been a wonderful support. But I'd like to build something like a transitional housing that really would meet the men's and women's needs coming out, that has kind of like a one-stop shop. So right now I'm looking to create reentry fairs that will do that so that it limits the confusion and access when they come home. And I'm hoping, that evolves into ultimately what I'd like to do.
Well, before my release, I knew I was going to finish my bachelor's in there, so I started studying the LSAT because I was thinking about law school also. So I was running around studying, getting tutored a little bit. But then I thought after 20 years in prison, I think I should go home and figure out where my life's going first before I commit to such a thing. And then I thought about grad school since I've been home, but my life has given me so many blessings that I'm not sure if that's the right thing for me, even though I love education, where my life is headed, the rooms I'm getting, and where I see myself a couple years from now. So I guess I'm playing it by ear. Still on the table, but it all depends on where my life ends up, because I'm getting in situations where it may not be needed, yeah, that's where I'm at with it. So we'll see.
Me as well. I have thought about pursuing a law degree. I don't know if the idea of 3 more years of college after having spent from 17 to 31 in prison and still having 2 years left to go is the most appealing, but I don't know. I haven't decided. What I do want to do is continue the work that I have been doing, which has been bringing financial opportunities and cultural education and mentorship to young black and brown boys in Boston who play tennis. About 3 years ago, I co-founded an organization that does that very work, and it's very near and dear to my heart as a former junior tennis player myself. Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, I'm definitely a student for life. I want to know everything, learn everything. So I do presume that in the future I will be in some sort of graduate program, but just what that looks like today, I'm not entirely clear on. Thank you. Oh, it's A Bright Future, abrightfuture.org.
It's his name.
I didn't come up with the name.
Yeah, sure.
So first of all, I just wanted to thank all you gentlemen for telling your experiences and sharing the effect that education has had on your lives. It's very valuable to me personally. I really appreciate hearing your insight and everything. I just wanted to know from each of you if you were comfortable sharing kind of what, if there was like a certain event or maybe not even an event, just kind of a state of mind or something that spurred you to kind of turn to education to kind of look for help in your life and changing your lives. Thank you.
Wow, that's a question. All right, I'll take that first. For me, as I explained in my first question, I went to jail and I was 24, so I was young, and I was given a large prison sentence, but that I had to overturn to come home. So I was bitter when I first came in. I was getting in trouble. I was in and out of segregation. I was dealing with gangs. I was just a mess. But then I met a brother right here who said, brother, you know what I mean, I always say this, who saw a very uniqueness in me that I did not even see in myself at the time. You know, who had a relentless pursuit, because he never gave up. Because I hope one day to have the patience this man to the left of me has. I would have been gave up on me. I'm getting in trouble, I'm constant, but he kept showing up. You know what I mean? And it was through his mentorship as well as my self-knowledge that he embarked me on, who sparked the flame for me to do that, to understand my role as a black man in the world, in America, that ultimately led me. Because once the veil of ignorance is lifted, you can't pull it back down and say, I want to be ignorant. I tried. It's not. No, I'm just joking. But because you start to see a world and start to see how really messed up things are. You're like, wow, I've been floating through this world for 27 years, and and it's hard. So yes, that began my journey of a different type of education, of the being that I keep talking about. So yes, that's what it was for me.
This means I have to go second? That's what this means? Okay. All right. I would say it started very early into my incarceration. So just to give you, again, a little context, as I got incarcerated, I was already looking into colleges. So I kind of had the weight of feeling like, all right, here's a kid who was on a path to college and then just derailed his whole life. So I kind of had an inner motivation to prove to the world, to prove to myself that, you know, this smart kid who made a dumb decision isn't really dumb, right? So that was kind of an internal motivation for me to consume knowledge, to fill myself with knowledge, to just become the best version of myself that I could. So I was fortunate in that regard that I was that focused and motivated that early into my sentence, because oftentimes people do go through a period of like adjustment where they do get into trouble, as David spoke to, before they start kind of getting clear about how they want to spend their time in prison. But to answer your question more directly, I would say that reading and falling in love with reading more than anything was kind of the point at which I really made the discovery for myself that education was, you know, a superpower, that it was phenomenal, and that it could literally just transform you and change the trajectory of your life.
So for me, I would say, I think everybody has a rock bottom. So my rock bottom was when I first came in, I was 17, and the prison operated completely different than what we see today. It was very violent. And that was like everyday situation. It wasn't like violence was a normal feature of it. So I think part of that was too, I was angry over the circumstances of having been wrongly convicted and then not knowing what to do with that. And so a lot of that was meeting a different type of challenge to make sure that I wasn't victimized in a man's prison at 17. And there was a bunch of us that came in so young that's never really happened before. My generation was the first generation of folks, young folks, where they flooded young kids into Walpole. You know, and Walpole was a dangerous, violent place at that time. And so after a while of having gone back and forth to segregation for so long, I had this conversation with my mother, and she was just like, you know, and I said to her, man, like, you know, I'm in seg. They just opened up this new place called DDU. They said that they're going to send me there, and I don't know how long I'm going to be there. And she said, son, don't you think that when they have to keep locking you up inside of a prison that there's something wrong? And that is what triggered in my mind to start asking myself the question, why was I so angry? And then once I started dealing with that, you know, it led me on a journey of reading. My father had sent me 5 books that traveled with me everywhere I went in Walpole, right? Back and forth to the whole. And I never read it, never read any of them. But during that moment, I picked up that book, and it was by Hakeem Ubuti, and it was called Blackmail Obsolete. And in that book, he explained 2 versions of suicide. He said that, this is his explanations, not mine, but he said that, you know, there's the direct way of suicide, which is, you know, you kill yourself, and then there's what he termed infracticide. He said that young kids running into the streets every single day doing the type of acts in which they were doing was committing infracticide, and he defined that as putting yourself in a set of circumstances in which you know death should follow, right? And it made me think in terms of me and my peers, and we thought that most of us thought in that time that we was gonna die, you know? And then what we started to define as bravado was really almost a sense of insanity, right? And when it gave me the ability to kind of analyze myself in a different way and then start to understand this thing that he was talking about called oppression and what oppression does and how it warps your thinking and mind and how it links you to a system that really perpetuates the idea of slavery in all these different forms. And that was like an eye-opening book. That book led me on to a whole different journey of reading and a journey of self-discovery. So by that time, that's when I decided that I wanted to change. But change for me meant something different. It meant when I got out of prison, because I had to maintain this exterior of hardness while I was in prison. And it wasn't until my little brothers that followed after me, trying to live up to my reputation, received life sentences, you know, that I realized that I couldn't wait.
For me, not as great as these guys, but I guess I was like one of the most reluctant. I did think of myself as a pretty intelligent kid. I've been in the system since I was like 13 years old, in and out. So it's about 30 years of incarceration, in and out. But for me, truthfully, it was just about earning good time. And for those who don't know what good time is that if you're serving a pretty lengthy prison sentence, it allows you to earn back some time that, you know, you've been given, right? So for me, at the time, EPI was just not even a certificate program. It was just for college credits, but it guaranteed you 3 years of good time. So why not, right? I was motivated. I wanted to come home. I was just a knucklehead kid. who wanted to continue to come home and do what I was doing, right? Live the greatest life, they achieve the American dream, whichever way it took. But I don't know, it kind of all changed. Everybody, everybody tells me how different I am now. I mean, I don't see myself as like so different. I think I'm still the kid that likes to play at the park and eat vanilla ice cream. But I just know that there's more flavors than vanilla ice cream now. So,
Thank you for your generosity sharing with us. My question is this. In your self-introductions, it seemed to me like a lot of you were talking about that moment when the scales fell from your eyes and you understood systems of power. You understood sort of how power operates in this world and the importance of gaining not only that understanding, but that sense of empowerment and the skills, debate, conversation, back and forth, being able to self-regulate your emotions like I'm trying to do right now, and communicate. So I had a really concrete question, which was, what are some of you talked about your dad's books, which sort of answers it, but what are some of the books or assignments or things that you did in EPI that helped you understand and empower you to act in the world?
Oh,
I was gonna say, I'll say it before anybody. Manisha, where are you? First course, power and privilege, off the back.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
that's it? All right. Well, I think for me, I read a lot of books, but I think what David made the point earlier, and it's so true, is that first you have to have self-knowledge. You got to get an understanding of who you are, what you are, where you come from, and link back to that understanding, because then you can also appreciate everything that you receive afterwards now, the importance of it. And so that was the first knowledge. The second knowledge of reading was to understand systems, really did come through learning how to understand. And what I mean by that, like, for instance, we always say white and black, but we don't talk about how those things came into formation. We don't talk about how whites became known as whites and what were they known prior to that and who came up with this system of ideas. Why did we start identifying blacks under this racial hierarchy that we do in the manner in which we do, and why do we use the terms ethnicities? Those are the type of things that I learned and was reading about and that was introduced to me, which I would always summarize as, oh, it's just racist, right? I mean, I think we all kind of do that in terms. We all say, oh, yeah, it's just racist. But then when we ask to expound on it, we don't really know how to, And there was a lot of books I would have never read, like Marie Brown, I hope I didn't slaughter her name, through Wendy's class, that really kind of gave me introduced me that the struggle was still going on in many forms, right? And that there were people pushing back in many different ways. Like I'm deciding not to use capital letters, and that's my way of rebelling. And I had to ask Wendy, like, why is she not capitalizing and using? I don't understand. And she was, but that's her way of resistance. She's not going to play by the writing rules. And I'm like, oh, okay. But that was one of many different ways of resisting, and I understood resisting, the language of resistance. So, I think for me, a lot of those types of readings is what fueled me and kept me going.
well, for me, wow. It is the life lessons of EPI that I often speak about. For example, our Black Revolutionary Thought class.
Mm-hmm.
Kim McLaren, for those who don't know.
That's right. Hold up, give that up for Kim. Give that up for Kim.
She gave me a different aspect of, first of all, she made us think about slavery from a woman's perspective,
Right.
which most of us know that men deeds are often valorized and women's are often minimized or whitewashed completely throughout American history. So I left that class and I told her this, and I thanked her for this understanding that even as a black man in America, as hard as we had it, and probably will have it, who knows, the future, there is a privilege that I have as a male that I never understood or even gave a second thought to until her class. And I have took that life lesson with me to this day. And there are people in this audience who've seen me speak at other engagements that work with me in organizing who understand that I center the voices of women in everything I do. And I give that, and I contribute that to that class. Somebody here asked me what's my favorite class in EBI. I looked around and said, don't tell nobody. Because it was one of the classes that they'll tell you I protested when it was coming. I said, what the hell are we gonna do with this, man? This is crazy. Manisha, Kat, what's going on? And I love it, theater. I had no idea of the different genres of theater, how it can be used as a protest, something me and my brother love to do. But I mean, so I'm like, wow. Because you often think of Broadway, Lion King, nothing disrespect, whoever's looking. But Holster, Professor, he brought us into a whole different world of theater that I did not understand. So leaving EPI at the end allowed me to this day to go in so many different discourse communities now and understand what the hell's going on. So I can sit around some theater majors, maybe can't talk to it to their level, but I can have an understanding when they talk about certain terms. Economics, shout out to Sally. Writing, Shane, I'm a better writer because of the different styles of writing, because I love to write that we've learned throughout. It's just so many things I've learned. I mean, going into that I just, my former chances, it's just shout out to EPI, that's all. It's amazing.
So one course for me that gave me a greater understanding of how power operates in America and just like how systematic everything is was Race and Ethnicity, a course taught by Dean Anson. And this was kind of centered in critical race theory. It was the first time that I actually was ever introduced to that concept. And it was very enlightening for me for a variety of reasons, but in particular, what I want to highlight here is just how kind of foundational and fundamental race has been in kind of structuring our society here in America. That, when you kind of have a fuller understanding of that, you better understand all the implications of it and how deep-seated it is and how hard it is to kind of uproot because it's so entrenched and because it's so foundational to the very structuring of our society in America. So for me, it would definitely be the Race and Ethnicity course, for sure.
And Afrofuturism, I forgot about that. Oh my God.
Hello, I'm Jonathan. I just have one question in particular. The conditions in prisons are notoriously horrible, and I just wanted to ask, how did they affect all of your educational journeys in the EPI program? Because it must have been really tough being in prison, trying to educate yourself, dealing with all that. How did you guys cope and everything? I don't know.
Well, yeah,
COVID too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mac, you want to take
Yeah,
this
we
one?
had a lot of stops and goes along the way, but pretty much we kind of had our own little community going on, you know. So I spoke about this at another, engagement. Which was that, a lot of times guys would see us at the table talking, trying to understand our curriculum, and next thing you know, we got 6, 7 other guys standing around like, what are y'all doing? Because we're making it look interesting, and really we're just trying to figure out what is going on. But because of that, it really it really kind of is how EPI and other college programs started to get this reputation. Everyone started to pay attention to it, and they became more curious about it, and they wanted to actually join on to it. And, so for me, the conditions are that, and then you have to navigate the fact that there are some probably in the administrative and also in the officers' positions who do not agree that this college should be given to us, and we should not be beneficiaries of that. And so you have to navigate that with delicacy, because some of us, like myself, would like to go and hardly advocate, and that means something completely different for us, and compared to the needs of EPI having to be able to separately negotiate in order to sustain its classes, for all, right? So at times I wanted to kind of, take a flamethrower and really just burn everything down to make the point of you can't do that to us. But, you have to kind of negotiate and compromise in ways that, we had to learn how to do to keep the program moving forward, right? So those are some of the challenges that we dealt with. But as far as us learning together, I think it never really impeded us, because most of us were in units together with each other. So there was very seldomly you might have that where one of us was just by ourselves. We was mostly in the units. So even when the units were shut down, we were able to kind of get with each other and help each other out to the best of our ability.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just to build further on like some of the conditions and stuff like that we had to deal with. One of the hardest things to do was to get the resources and material we needed to do to get the studies done. Complications with professors bringing in stacks of paper, right? You guys heard earlier about contraband and stuff like that. So if a professor came in with like 150 pages of work, it had to go through a 3-day process, and sometimes we didn't get to see what our grade was for like 3 weeks. So that was kind of hard and stuff like that, so just being able to do that and go through things like that was a struggle. Sometimes we couldn't get the books, especially with Cara's class, which was film heavy. We couldn't watch any of the films because some of the films wasn't quote unquote allowed, right? So there was complications like that where we had to rearrange our studies. Whether I should give this props to the professors who were really good at rearranging our studies so that it could still fulfill the curriculum that we had to accomplish. And then not only that, but some of the conditions that we had to go through was, we also spoke today about, or you guys have heard about, shifting the culture, right? So, in prison, what we really did was we made being nerds a cool thing.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So like, next thing you know, everybody was like, hey, if you guys watch the BPI program, then, it was kind of like a lot of the same things, right? And if people aren't aware and people don't know the opportunities, they don't know what's really out there. So what we really did was bring that awareness to the forefront and made it visible so that people can see their opportunities as well. And therefore, hey, being a nerd can be cool.
One complication that we encountered all too often was delays, and the delays would come from just other interferences that might have happened at the prison. Let's say a fight occurred somewhere else, totally unrelated to any EPI student, anything at all, but because the running of the prison or the running of EPI is tied to the running of the prison, we're subject to all of the things that go along with the running of the prison. So I remember clearly, distinctly, there will be times where we had important things going on in that particular day, maybe giving a speech or maybe taking a quiz or a test, but we would be delayed because we had to wait for a freeze up, as they call it, to be cleared before movement could resume. So definitely, like, a lot of things were out of our control, and that impeded our education for sure. But I would say that the self-motivation that everyone brought along with the teachers and the TA, I mean, it didn't stop us from doing what we needed to do, and that ultimately, I guess, it was an impediment, but it didn't really deter us, and it didn't prevent us rather from getting our education.
I guess prison can be a very powerful place, but a very ignorant place too, depending on. In College Behind Bars, a documentary I believe we're going to view later, he spoke about navigating this system as a student and a person incarcerated. There's a favorite saying by staff in DOC, like, why should they, because a lot of them don't feel, I got to pay for my kids' tuition, I'm struggling, what the F they get to go to, we hear it all the time. They say it sidebars. So instead of meeting ignorance with ignorance, I guess, I always took them times to engage them. Because I believe once I entered into EPI, I had a duty to represent myself in a certain way that would do away with the preconceived notions that are attached to, because the normal way they expect us to do is react in that way. Mm-hmm. So now I can't tell you how many countless conversations. By the time I was done with them, I had them like, all right, you got me there. Because that's all it takes sometimes. Just take a little time, explain to them. You know what I mean? Which one do you want, this or that? You give them the alternatives, because only somebody completely ignorant, nobody's complete, would say, I still want that, I don't care. I want you to come home the same way you want to come home. And we have to be mindful that the carceral system was not designed to make us thrive. You know what I mean? So we're operating, like Max said, on a fine line. So I used to always talk about the tough job Manisha has dealing with that. They would tell you, I'd be like, everybody, I don't know what's going on. I said, gentlemen, you got to understand, the political hat is a very, very light one, very heavy one to wear, because we got to appease both. The system, they want, it's a give and take. So you understand that. So I was there during COVID, Mac was there. That was a rough time for us. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Seeing people getting took out on a regular basis. We had a very supportive and very team, from the school system, Brian and them, to Kara and them, to working. They created a system that kept us afloat. A mail system that kept us afloat. We was able to get and receive assignments, but it was a very tough time, because when you seeing people, a couple people died, people was dying. It was a horror show. Moving people around. Last thing you want to do is write an essay. The last thing on your mind. You're calling home, your family members are sick, you're going through something you don't know. All we got is each other to turn to. So we had a wonderful EPI team during that. And together, collectively, we got through it. I still don't know how. I always talk about, but I don't know how we got through that portion of it, but we did. And we did it together. So once again, I would rather no other family but them.
Also, I just want to say, Brian and Dennis really came through in a big way during that time. You know, Brian and Dennis, Brian works under Dennis. Dennis is the head principal at MCI Concord. And, you know, for me, you know, and I say this objectively, like, they really kind of like stepped it up. They made the rounds in the unit. They talked to us. They kept us informed about what was going on with the classes, how delayed we were. Just as much as they could share, they would, so that we weren't kind of like more an uproar during that uncertain time. So I do want to acknowledge that.
And just for a little bit of context, you know, when, of course, the pandemic hit 3 years ago on the college campus here, things shut down and classes went on Zoom. But Zoom was not an option inside Massachusetts state prisons. Yeah. And so there was a lot of adjustment that had to take place. But we also have to remember that incarcerated folks were confined to their cells for 23 and a half hours a day during that period. So those are really difficult conditions to be dealing with. And then on top of that, college, right? And so we did, you know, for the first several months, we did a kind of mail system, mailing in and out assignments and, you know, lecture notes, and trying to really get creative on how we could deliver content. And then in the fall, as things kind of opened up, we had reduced capacity in classrooms, so every class was split in two. There was TAs assigned to every class to try and mimic contact hours. It was really quite complex, and it took a lot of, you know, flexibility and support from the administration here at Emerson. Of course, Dennis and Bri were heroes in this regard, and the students always brought it, right? I mean, even though these conditions were so difficult, they remained fully committed, and they brought their best selves, and classes continue to be those like wonderful dynamic learning spaces. Wendy, did you want to say something about this?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I was just wondering regarding academic institutions, what does strong post-release support look like? Like, what is a strong partnership between formerly incarcerated people or formerly incarcerated students and academic institutions?
Wow, that's a good question.
Okay, sure. For me, it's about longevity, right? You know, you hear all these programs. Oh, you know, we'll help you get your GED. We'll help you get your college degree. We'll help you with this. We'll help you with that. Next thing you know, you come home and it's like, well, you made it to your front door, so we'll go with you. You know, that's not the case with EPI. I've been home since 2020. It's 3 years later. I'm still here. I'm in front of you guys. This just shows that, you know, this is groundbreaking work for community relationships that will further progress society in a better way. You know, there's that saying that Carl once said, I believe, which is it takes a village to raise a child, but I believe it takes a village to make a better community as well. So, yeah.
I just want to say, for me, EPI has a reentry component, and also to kind of, you know, to get you academically prepared has really took a lot of steps to prepare me, my transition. And so that I would be, you know, I would be comfortable in the classroom, how to navigate in the Canvas, you know, which is something new. I had never worked a laptop, didn't understand, you know, the components of those things, even down to like getting my license, which, you know, I had to take a few times, right? So, you know, where the professors would let me borrow their cars, shout out to Wendy, hey, and, you know, or just being taken there by Sally, shout out to Sally, you know, just everyone just worked together cohesively as a family. And that's how I felt like I was with my family, you know, that I was getting things that I needed, getting the services that I needed. And that's, you know, that is a lot compared to that I was in a transitional place that was supposed to provide those services for me, but weren't, you know. So, you know, if you compare those two, you know, I'd say, you know, my transition with EPI was much better than the transitional place that I was staying at.
Just want to come in on one point really quick, which is the Department of Correction allowed us to expand the number of people affiliated with Emerson who are serving as reentry volunteers. We had to get approval for faculty or administrators like Manisha, Stephen, and I to be reentry volunteers who could actually work with the students once they're released. And it has been so fundamentally important for the students, and Max spoke to it, I'm sure others will have things to say, to be able to have their faculty who they've gotten to know, who they trust, who they have relationships with from the inside, be mentors and support systems to them on the outside. And so that has been critical to the work that the Reentry and College Outside program has done over the last year and a half.
I just want to say this, and you can stop me anytime. When EPI started, there was no reentry component to it. I believe we started with just college credits. And Manisha and Kara worked tooth and nail to build it piece by piece. Then ultimately, slowly but surely, it became a degree program. So, and then after that, I believe, if I'm not correct, maybe she asked what next. So there had to be steps to this. We couldn't just say think reentry without first building her college program. That's backwards. So once we understood what EPI was 2-3 years, and now we can focus on what needs. She could have stopped it at that, but my job is to get you a degree. But rather, what EPI did was we're going to invest in your future, helping you get home. Now, I came home with a degree, so my needs is different than Mac. Mac needs to get, like he said, college class ready. I need to get career ready. And I remember me needing my license to get the job that I do now in Roker. And I remember Kara pulling up in her personal car on Saturdays to get me prepared and allow me to drive around the city, parallel park, and practice for. This is the type of support I'm talking about, the above and beyond support, not just the regular support. You know what I mean? The support that we need each other, because each of us have our own hurdles that we have to overcome.
Right.
So what I may need, Charlie and Kevin coming home, may need something different. And they have been, I think, for each of us, tried their best and continue to do their best to meet us where we're at. And that says something powerful to the individuals they are, individually and collectively as EPI. And what more can you say?
What more can you say is valid, right?
Definitely.
But one thing I will add is that I think that what academic institutions can do for former college students in prison, or formerly incarcerated college students rather, is just can make our presence more known on campus, right? So that people who might have a curiosity or people who might want to help know that they can and that there's an opportunity for them. But apart from that, I think everything else was said.
And I will just add that we are so delighted to have a reentry coordinator, Betsy Chase. So you're somewhere around here.
Shout out.
So Betsy started in January, came highly recommended by David, and we feel really, really lucky to have her to provide that case support to students, to help coordinate the support that they receive when they're outside to help them flourish. So we're really excited about having this role, and we're looking forward to seeing our reentry program develop.
Once again, I would like to commend your courage to actually finish your program successfully. It's actually worth commendable. My question is, each of you, if you have the privilege to create this same program, what will you do differently? Because I want to believe the program is not yet perfect. There's still some things to be done in order to make the program more perfect. So I want you to see yourself in that shoe. The opportunity is given to you now. What will you do differently? Thank you.
That's a good question.
Put us on the spot there.
So that I understand the question, is that you're asking what will we do differently if the
Opportunity
to create for college. Oh wow! So I guess based on my experience, I think that there's a couple of things given what the limitations of the Department of Corrections are, and the subculture that exists there. So I think that I would probably look to do some more internal discussions with the administration to kind of work out some of these nuances that let's say couldn't be calculated in, like what happens if there is a major lockdown, and how do we now create hours, the necessary hours, so that we can make sure that they graduate on time and within this time frame. How willing are you to meet us at this outcome? And I say that because of my own different challenges, having been moved to a minimum and then not being able to finish the 4 classes that I would be, otherwise I would have graduated with a degree in hand like David. So those are the things I would have looked at. And then I would have probably you know, access to computer literacy, right? Laptops. I would have did the thing, allowed at least, or tried to build the program so that it had, and this is not to say that these things were not done or attempted, but just this would be my own ideal college, right? Is that we would give us access to the internet that simulates access, so that we at least know how to navigate the internet. Get us ready, you know, so that we can now, if I join an academic class on the outside, I know how to navigate the computers and things that I need to do. The search engines to JSTOR. Let us really look at the articles so that we really understand what we're asking for, requesting, and it sets down, you know, it cuts down limitations. Those are the things I would have looked at as a model, ideally, that to me would have made it more efficient for us to learn. And then, you know, give us more access to the college, so that we'll be able to work out those things that we can't figure out ourselves. You know, like whether that be a call line or something to the effect to ask our tutors. Because like on the outside campus, if I got a question, I just email my professor, you know, and ask, and then I expect an answer at some point. But I can't do that in the inside. So be able to have a call line or something that would allow me that ability to do that kind of, you know, facilitates learning better.
I really don't have an answer for that, as surprising as that is, but I'm sitting here thinking. I guess there's a term called inside out programming where students come to the campus, come to the prison, and they do a semester with us. I guess if I can add anything, that experience probably would be good. You know what I mean? Because I know Professor, she has some wonderful students that helps us with the communication class. I mean, I wonder what that young man that helped me is up to now. He was very bright in communicating. So, yeah, maybe an inside-out program one semester would be good.
One thing I'll add, just kind of based on my own personal experience, I came into EPI in the first cohort with everyone else, but I left after 18 months and only having gained about a year's worth of credits. I left because I had to make a strategic decision to stay and possibly negatively impact the likelihood of my getting parole, or go down to a minimum security and build up that kind of reputation of showing that, okay, I can do well under less restrictive environments so that I can then ultimately get paroled. So that was a choice that I had to make, and one that comes with pros and cons. So I would say if I had it to do all over again, or if they had it to do all over again, maybe think about, or anticipate rather, what the education process looks like for people once they leave the medium, and see maybe if they could have developed programs in different institutions maybe at the outset. Obviously, logistically, that might have been difficult, but in a perfect world, I mean, I would have personally benefited from that, and I probably, like David or like Mac, I would have had much more credits under my belt.
And I'll just add that in summer of 2022, we did start offering courses at Northeastern Correctional Center, which is a minimum security prison right across the street from MCI Concord, so that students like Mac, and he was our first student over at the farm, as it's also called, Northeastern Correctional Center, could continue to make progress on their degrees, even if they have a change of status within the Department of Correction. So unfortunately, we didn't have that going in time to benefit Ahmad, but it did work out for some of the students that we have over at Northeastern today. All right, we have a few more minutes for questions, so why don't we have our next question?
Hi, thank you guys all for sharing your perspectives. It's so amazing to hear. Yes, sorry. It's wonderful to hear your perspectives, and as I've been reading Education Behind the Wall and learning more about EPI, I'm learning that different backgrounds and histories have created different ideas of what is needed, what is necessary to create change. And you guys are all involved in activism and real action-oriented things, and that is awesome. at Emerson, we make a lot of art. We're an art school, and we always have these like conversations in class, like, can art make change? And with Emerson students, almost always we're like, yes, of course, art can make change. And we were having this discussion in Mako's class, and all the students were like, yes, of course, art can make change. And then she mentioned something really interesting, was that when she had this discussion in an incarcerated students class, all of the students said, no, art is not enough. And that was really interesting to me, and I would love to hear more on that, and like your perspective, like why is art not enough?
Sure, I can say something to that just because of my experience here at Emerson so far. I work at the Engagement Lab, which is part of Emerson, and through that work study, I was also able to take a course called Making Games for Change, right? So in that process, what we was able to do was, as students of the class, we were able to work with community members in developing a game for social change. So I believe a concept like that is such a unique thing that can be brought into the classroom, where you are learning from the community to how to effectively affect the community with change, right? So I do believe that if we're going to shift culture and create change, then we also need to create the way we teach as well. How can we learn to better a community if we don't bring those from the community into the classrooms and learn what the problems are, and then address these problems in a proper way?
Me, myself, I don't believe that art can change. I'm sorry, I don't think that art can change the social conditions. I think it can inspire, but change, I think, takes more labor, right? And more thought process behind it. Not to knock anybody's artistic abilities, but from my experience, I've seen a lot of artists behind the wall. John is one of them, who are great artists and expressive artists, and have, even, created things like officers beating prisoners, over the head with batons, and as a way of just expressing, and as a cathartic way of just releasing that type of thing, right? And so I guess there's an argument to say that, does it help him? Does it change him? Does it, propels him forward? Maybe, I'm not sure. But does it change the conditions around him? I would say no, and I've never witnessed it, right? So I think that the type of change that we're talking about, at least for someone formerly incarcerated, is, really physical change, which is constructual. That type of social change that comes along with the type of community togetherness or awareness that then says that, look, we need to address this, and this is the way we need to address it, and then have that sense of accountability along the way. I think for most of us, we've experienced hard reality, right? And it's hard for many of you to even imagine what that means, because you've never had to spend 23 hours in a space that's like a bathroom, and that's called your cell, and then share that with somebody, and if that somebody doesn't have etiquette, how to negotiate those types of relationships, and especially during the lockdown, if you have to then defecate in that same cell with that person in there. See, these are things that you probably can't even really comprehend, And so when we think in terms of what, art changing that, no, that's not what changes that. Like I said, I think you can inspire it, but the things that changes that is, community, conscious decision making from top to bottom that says, look, you're warehousing a bunch of these guys in a prison that can't house all these guys, and these cells are only designed for single occupancy. So we need to adjust and figure out a way, a path forward. So that's my thinking, just so that you understand.
I don't remember. I was.
For the sake of time, can we take the last question,
Yeah,
David, and
no
maybe you
problem.
can take the lead on
Thank you.
answering that?
Yes.
We're almost out of time. Okay, thank you for waiting so patiently.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
but,
no.
No.
Don't apologize.
I'll make it quick. I got you. So, my question is, I know a lot of you work with youth presently, and I'm just interested, given the comment about the unveiling that comes when you read like political theory and how you work with youth to support them through that unveiling, because I think a lot of anger and angst can result from that unveiling as well. So just the way you work with youth to work through that.
Well, I guess they can. Yes. I work with them every day. I work at Roca. I'm a youth supervisor. I have a caseload about 27, and at my job, we work with the city's highest risk youth, who are usually driving the violence in the cities that Roca is present at, which is 5 different cities throughout Massachusetts, Baltimore, and Connecticut. I believe my life experiences sets me apart from my colleagues. We all do wonderful work, but when we're dealing with a population that I identify with, and we're talking about a population that has lost hope, and I was riding with a certain person, and he was like, I asked my we call them YPs, youth participants, what is his 5-year plan? And I kind of looked at him like, but he didn't understand this demographic. 5-year plan. These are young men who don't even have a 5-day plan, let alone 5 years. I sit with them. What do you see as I'm just living day to day? And I can identify with that because that was me at their age. Expectancy life, 17, 16. I lost half of my childhood friends' makeup. I was lucky to make it out of crack era in New York. So I sit with them and I give them my experience, but I also talk to them in a way where, through questions, so they can learn I'm not trying to teach them what to think, but how to think. You know what I mean? And so they help them regulate their emotions. It's kind of like a cognitive behavioral theory type of setup, a think through field to help them understand how the brain works. So a lot of the things I do with them are rooted in brain science. They may not understand it, so I start with teaching them that, and then hopefully we believe that the brain can be rewired. Because when you talk to a 15-year-old, I got the B3 caseload. That's the most sensitive caseload, which is from the ages 14 to 17. Because what data has shown is that that's the most volatile age group in Boston, and it's getting younger. It's amazing. So there's no one way to do it, but as I'm talking about unveiling ignorance, for me, reading books by like George Jackson and understanding America's historical traps for that's what did it for me. And understanding that this culture that he explained to me before I knew it, that gangsterism was given to us, that I didn't somehow invent this, that I thought I did. You know what I mean? I was doing something new, and he was like, nah, brother, that was given, explaining that to us. That's what I mean by, you be like, oh, I was duped. And nobody likes the feeling of being duped. That's what I mean by the unveiling. It's like, wow, they gave us this, then turned around and prosecuted us for it so they could systematically lock us out, the American dream, so to speak. That is diabolical geniusness. I mean, that's like, wow. You know what I mean? So I try to teach these young men that. I come from a different aspect. I try to teach them that. And it's a long journey, you know what I mean? And you see little pockets of hope. When you meet them and they be like, David, I was about to do this. I had my gun, but I thought about it, I flexed my thinking. That is a term we use when you think about it. You know what I mean? When you think about, this dude's disrespecting me, but it's founded, is that really truth, or is that something we teach them? You know what I mean? And so when you see that, you see little things like, oh wow, he's getting it slowly. But it's like me. When they fall short, I'm there to catch them. Not to chastise them. Never you know better. They're 15. They're not going to get it. Nobody's their 15 self at 40, 30. I hope not. You know what I mean? At 40, 30. It's a process of evolution. So, you know what I mean? Those are my kids. I love them, and I'm there every day. They texting me right now. They think I'm at work. So, you know what I mean? And yes, for me, that's what it is.
Okay,
let me just say just one thing. There's a lot of minds that get changed in prison, and The reason why I was most successful with a lot of these guys, especially younger guys, is because I went through the trajectory that they went through. I also understood, as someone that had been known for violence, that when they hear it from me, that they would be like, hold up, there's got to be something to it now, because I know that if he was on this and look at him now, what altered his mind? That gave me an advantage, because I didn't do these things because I needed to check in or that I got soft, or anything like that, which usually in prison you lose credibility as a result of, right? So because of that, it's easy then to speak to those experiences as a formula to unlock other people's minds. Now, David's going to have the ability to unlock other minds differently than I'm going to be able to by using his experience. But to be able to look at their gifts first and then talk about their gifts and then how they're misusing their gifts, right, is really what alters a lot of their trajectory, because it makes them want to understand more about themselves. Why are you saying that and no one else is acknowledging that in that way? And I think that that's what it comes down to, because there's been such a lack of love in our lives, and so we have to almost reformulate that.
Thank you, Mac. So we are out of time, but I want to say that students are at the heart of the Emerson Prison Initiative. We are so grateful that you took the time to share some of your stories here with us today. So please join me in thanking David and Ahmad and Mac and John